Hi guys, my name is Terry, and today is July the 7th, 2019. I want to talk to you guys about the what came actually in my spirit last week. I was sitting here in my dining room and I was just having my time with God and just having that moment by myself. And I was thinking about relationships, and what dropped in my spirit was what's the dynamics of a relationship between a man and a woman. And as that came to me, I was like, wow, what is the dynamics between a relationship between a man and a woman? What makes that a dynamic relationship? So as I was thinking, I was like, that's a good question. I need to ask myself that and what I think. But before I even give you my intake on what a dynamic relationship is, let me give you the definition of what dynamics mean actually. The definition of the word dynamics means characterized by constant change, activity, or progress of a person. It can be positive in attitude and full of energy and new ideas. Dynamics also means to determine to have something that you're willing to work for in a relationship that will add value, love, and definitely respect. Also, as I was looking up the word dynamics, I saw the synonyms of the word in dynamics, and it had a lot of listing in it. So your dynamic relationship could be energetic, spirited, active, lively, zestful, vital, ferocious, strong, forceful. It can be potent, it can be positive, it can be effective, it can be effectual, high powered, it can be aggressive, it can be driven, pushing, or it can be bold. But a dynamic relationship is two people who describe things which are the beginning and the developing, new and emerging in embryonic. So that is the definition of a dynamic relationship according to the dictionary. But what my take is on what I think a dynamic relationship is every dynamic relationship has its pros and cons. So you pretty much have to see, is there more pros versus cons in that dynamic relationship? Because if there's more pros, then you know you're on the right path and you know it's more dynamic. So for me, I always also had to always think, well, when you're in a relationship, do you find yourself giving more than your partner? That to me, I think that's a con in a dynamic relationship. But I believe if you are giving equal in that relationship, that's a dynamic pro to that relationship between a man and a woman. I think also a dynamic relationship is when each individual actually complements one another, not tearing each other down. I also think that you can sustain the test of time rather the relationship when you're having situations when it's good or bad. And the key thing for me is when you are, I think, as a dynamic relationship, is making sure you put God first, that He is in the center. And I really strongly say in the center of your relationship, because with God, I'm telling you, He will balance all of that out, even when you don't think that it can work. If you put Him in the center, oh, trust me, it can work. And I think that is the key to a dynamic relationship. That should have been number one, that I should have actually started off with, making sure God is in the center of that relationship. Another big thing to me as far as a dynamic relationship between a man and a woman is the finances. That's a conversation that every person should have when you're walking into a relationship with someone and you're going to that next level. Making sure that you have an understanding of how that individual is when it comes to finances and their money, because it's very important, because it can hinder your relationship if you're not talking about the finances and trying to have your finances in order. Not saying that it's going to be perfect right off bat, but if you're in agreement with building and making sure your finances in order and you're on one accord with that, then I think that's a dynamic part of a relationship between a man and a woman, because you are wanting to be on the same page when it comes to finances and you're balancing that thing out, so that way you can have a better and brighter future. Because I've noticed that sometimes when you don't talk about finances and you just leave it up in the air, and things start transpiring where things start becoming complicated, and you're either in the relationship and you're living together, or you're married, and one person's responsible but the other one is not. That can be a con to the relationship. But I believe that if you communicate with that part of your relationship, and making sure you have that in order, and things are balancing itself out because you have an understanding of where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do together, I think that is a positive dynamic impact on a woman and a man's relationship. Another thing I want to talk about is communication with one another. Communication with one another is key, because that shows you who that individual is as an individual. And communication is like, if you don't have a communication, it's hard to even listen to one another. I think when you communicate and having a dynamic relationship is communication is when you're speaking to each other, not at each other. Because when you're speaking at each other, it's like you're lecturing. It's like that person is a child and you're scolding them, and you're not clearly listening to what they're saying and where their feelings are. So it's better to communicate by talking to each other in a respectful manner, and respecting one another. So communication is key, because if you don't have communication in a relationship, it will not grow. Actually, it will decline, because you're not listening to that individual and what that person's needs are. You're just wanting what you want at that time. So I believe communication, good communication and understanding is a great part of the dynamics of a relationship. So that is my take on a relationship. And also my take on relationship is stability. And that all comes back to finances, but having stability in the home, having stability to where you can provide for your family. If you're looking to be married and you're wanting to have children and build a family and a future with somebody, having stability, that each person comes in having stability. It might not be on the same level, but if you have stability coming in the relationship, it makes it much better. Because not only are you accountable for just yourself, but you're accountable for somebody else that you share a love with, that you are sharing to be together as one. So stability to me is the key. I have been a single mom for over 13 years, and to me, stability is very important, that I'm able to provide, but not only I'm providing that, but when my partner we come together as one, that my daughter can see the stability that lies in the home, but that we're on one accord when it comes to stability. So that's a big deal for me. And like I said, that is my take on what a dynamic relationship is. It's making sure that you have a balance in your relationship. And like I said, you're not going to always agree with one another. It's okay to disagree to agree, but don't go to bed angry. Also, that's another part of a dynamic relationship, not going to bed angry at one another. You can be mad during the day, but make sure that you come to a mutual understanding at the end of the day, so you're not holding that resentment or that anger on to the next day, because then you haven't really been able to actually solve the problem. And sometimes it's not going to be solved right away, but you definitely don't want to have that occurring issue over and over again. So I think that if you make sure you don't go to bed angry, I think that's part of a dynamic relationship. Even if you're not in agreement with that person, you still respecting what that person view or that person's take on on what occurred between you and your partner. So I thank you for listening to me today on my take on what a dynamic relationship means, because it's really, really important that you have more pros in a relationship versus cons. And I think if you have a lot of cons in your relationship, I think you need to reevaluate that. But if you have more pros in your relationship, then you know you have something dynamic. You just got to continue to work at it, um, to where you're happy. And another thing I want to also mention in a dynamic relationship is your identity. When you walk in identity, walk in your identity. Do not walk in the shadow of somebody else's identity, because that's where you will go wrong. You will get lost because you haven't walked in your own identity. So that's what makes a dynamic relationship, I think, that works for me. Walking in your own identity and not walking in the shadow of someone else's identity, because you will lose yourself if you're walking in somebody else's identity. So I hope that this has touched someone's heart, and I pray that you listen to my heart and the sincerity of what I feel of a dynamic relationship is between a man and a woman. And I just hope that you were blessed by listening to me. But I will have other people that I asked the same question. Did a survey, and there's a lot of other viewers that will be giving their, I'll be reading to you actually, their take on what they think a dynamic relationship is between a man and a woman. So I just want you to stay tuned for part 2 on the dynamics